doing 90 miles an hour. Bound from Omaha to Portland through Cheyenne and Laramie, we're heading west for Boise on the main line to the sea. Cross the Platte and Salt Lake City on to Vegas and LA. We're the Union Pacific and we've got the right of way. From the green fields of the prairies to the blue Pacific shore, we deliver your great cargo and come rolling home for more. On the backbone of our nation, you can see us make the climb. We're the Union Pacific and we're gonna be on time. From the green fields of the prairies to the blue Pacific shore, we deliver your great cargo and come rolling home for more. On the backbone of our nation, you can see us make the climb.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Steam Daily. In this video I will be discussing the Union Pacific Superpower trains, including their heritage, uses, and where they are today. Anyways, let's get started. Post-World War I, American railroads were having to carry more freight than they could handle. To cope with this, most railways used the double-heading strategy, basically using two engines to pull a lot of freight. This, however, was not efficient because railroads had to maintain each engine and pay for more employees. Since Union Pacific would stop at nothing to get its goods delivered, they devised a solution to this issue. Simply one powerful engine. As trucking was becoming a larger threat to railroads, the Union Pacific would be taking a gamble. They would spend a lot of money on one engine. If this engine was still not efficient, the Union Pacific would have to find another solution. Coming out of the Great Depression, Union Pacific already had a monster engine for the time. The 9000s class. The 9000 class had 12 drive wheels in a single group and a third cylinder. These engines were great on the plains, but struggled on the steeper, more curved terrain of the Rocky Mountains. These 9000s were a headache to operate and maintain due to their third cylinder and stiff chassis. The solution to the chassis issue was a new concept known as articulation. Basically, the engine was split in half and the two pieces were joined with a hinge at the center, so the locomotive can move around curves easier. In the year 1936, the first articulated trains exited the erecting hall. These new locomotives had some of the most modern features. These features included circulators in the firebox to help water boil evenly over 83 square feet and roller bearings on the axles for a smoother ride. The first test run was a fully loaded train that would travel from Ogden, Utah to Green River, Wyoming. The engine would then turn around and return to Ogden with a fully loaded train. This was a huge challenge for locomotives. Due to this, the Union Pacific Vice President William Jeffers named these engines the Challengers. During 10 years, around 105 Challengers roamed the Union Pacific line. These engines could pull passenger coaches at 70 miles per hour. A very impressive feat at the time. Around this time, other railroads were purchasing Challengers from Union Pacific. This investment really did pay off. However, at the end of the decade, war was rising. This meant even more freight and tonnage. The Challenger could easily take on the tonnage needed on the plains. But the Challenger needed a second helper locomotive to make the mountain passes. This would be the end for the Challenger's freight use. Most Challengers survived for passenger excursions, but most of them are now on static display in museums due to mechanical issues. The next generation of super-powered steam locomotives was here. Introducing the 4000s class, also known as the Big Boy. The 4000 Wasatch class of steam locomotives, built by the UP from 1941-1944, got their name Wasatch from the fact they were made to be able to pull large amounts of cargo up through the Wasatch mountain range. The first got their nickname Big Boys when one of the employees wrote Big Boy on the smokebox door of UP 4000 before it rolled out of shops in 1941. These locomotives were one of the largest and most powerful engines in the world. 25 of these new engines were drafted into the mountains to help with the freight. The 4000s basically complemented their younger, smaller siblings, as many of the 3900s using many of the cosmetic family's resemblances. Most 4000s were found in the mountains around Sherman Hill with the steepest grades. The 3900s would roam around the entire network, including Omaha, Portland, and Los Angeles. These engines aided America in their victory in World War II. After the war, the railroads were changing. Diesel, electric power was taking over passenger movement. and was now starting to run freight. This form of power was more cost-efficient for the line. The new engines needed less maintenance, which meant they could run for longer distances. Diesel power still had its limits. On average, a diesel locomotive could only reach 1,500 horsepower, requiring multiple units to be electrically operated together. To match the Challengers and big boys, the new diesels had to run in multiple units. Union Pacific set out to make a diesel-electric locomotive that could match their steam predecessors. Pre-World War II, Union Pacific and General Electric were working on two electric turbine locomotives. Using the knowledge from the electric turbines, General Electric's creation would be known as a gas turbine electric locomotive, or GTEL for short. This engine was different because the gas turbine engine would power the generator that could power the engine's traction motors. Exiting General Electric's yard in 1949, the first generation of the gas turbine electric locomotives, new engines would be more efficient than diesel or steam locomotives. They would be so much better for the line that Union Pacific would begin retiring more Challengers and big boys. Their tenders would be refurbished and used on the new engines. Due to oil shortages, the Union Pacific tested around with a propane-fueled engine. This was more efficient, but it came at the cost of safety, which Union Pacific could not risk. The railroad still believed that a railroad with a few powerful engines is better than a bunch of small, weak engines. Later on, Union Pacific made an offer to the three major locomotive builders. EMD created a monster of a diesel. They created 4 units for the Union Pacific. These engines were 2 standard GP35s and 2 monster DD35s. The 2 DDs had 2 diesel prime movers connected on one frame. This locomotive produced 5,000 horsepower. An impressive feat. In 1965, when the end was near for the GTELs, UP ordered 25 boosters. Later on, UP bought another 15 units, this time with cabs, creating the DD35. Almost at the same time, GE created their engine for the offer. This engine was known as the U50. These units were very similar to their EMD brothers, while trying to be more efficient and economical by using the old GTEL turbines. 2 versions of the engines were created. The Spartan U50 using 4 trucks, and the U50C used 3-axle trucks and an engine directed inwards. ALCO's creation was called the C855. This was the shortest-lived engine due to the weak frame. Later on, UP ordered more double diesels from EMD, but these diesels would have some modifications. Due to this, the DDA-40X was born. This would become the largest single-unit diesel locomotive in the world. These engines were known as Centennials in reference to the 100-year anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad. A major feat for the U.S. During 3 years, 47 Centennials were roaming the UP system. The last Centennial revenue run was in 1984. This would be the last of the super-powered engines. UP would now use the same power as the other railroads. Today, the world mostly uses diesel-electric power. That's all for today. Thank you for watching, and remember to like and subscribe and share for more videos in the future. Have a great day.